Hi, Stephanie. Would you like to unmute yourself? Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Yasmin. It's great to be here. I appreciate the Maryland PTAC's invitation to talk about the SBIR STTR program. I don't know exactly the backgrounds of everyone here on the call today. And so this presentation is built to provide an overview of kind of what the program is if you've never been a part of it or have never heard of it. And it also provides, of course, we want to talk about what the benefit of this program is. And so if you've been in the program before, if you're brand new to this, hopefully everyone can get something out of today's presentation. And as Yasmin mentioned, if you have questions, which I hope that you do, or even stories or something you want to share with the rest of the group, feel free to throw that into the chat. And then at the end of our presentation, we'll go through everything. So we'll kind of talk first about what we're going to go through today. Again, I'll mention what the program is. If you've never been a part of it, maybe you know a little bit about it. We'll just kind of talk about what this thing is. And we'll also talk about how it works and the considerations that you need to make before you decide to write a proposal for one of these program grants or contracts. Throughout the entire presentation, I will be talking about the benefits of the program, but then there are some specific benefits that I think are really nice about receiving money through this program that's really unique to this program and different from the rest of the federal government. So we'll focus on this topic throughout the entire presentation, but there's a couple elements I really want to point out to you. And hopefully near the end of this, you'll be interested enough and feel that you want to try to put your hat in for this money coming out of this program. And we'll kind of talk a little bit about the process. That is part and parcel to the considerations before you go into this. But of course, it's federal money. There's going to be a process that goes along with this. So I want to let you have a little bit of a taste of what this could mean for you if you want to go for it. Okay. Let's try to talk about what this program is. So SBIR stands for the Small Business Innovative Research Program, and STTR is part of, they go together, and it stands for Small Business Tech Transfer. And we'll talk about what the differences are between these two elements of the program. They're not two separate programs, they're all kind of together under what we call the SBIR STTR umbrella, but we'll talk about a little bit about the differences. The entire point of this program is to fund early stage R&D. I have tech in quotes here, we'll call these air quotes, because there's a lot of innovations that are funded through this program that are not high tech. I mean, we're not talking quantum computing or, crazy satellite situations, which all are, of course, funded through this program, but there's also a lot of low tech things and things that people just have never figured out and who are funded through these programs as well. So you don't have to be high tech to be innovative. This program is the largest source of early stage financing for US small businesses. So we like to call it seed funding. We like to call it non-dilutive capital, kind of using these growth mindset sort of terms, but essentially it's really to kind of get your company, or even if you are established, a new product or a new idea off the ground. It is a 3-phase program. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And this program is under the SBA. It's authorized by Congress. It's been around since the 80s. I should address right now that currently this program is set to expire at the end of September. However, and don't get worried, this has happened multiple times, of course, since the 80s, and it's currently being reviewed and in committee, and it needs to be reauthorized before September. So if you're interested in this program, definitely reach out to your representatives in Congress and urge them to support keeping this program around. I personally am not too worried about seeing it disappear. It has too much good stuff about it and too many people want to keep it around. But more voices always helps for sure. So anyway, the SBA is the coordinating agency for this program. So Congress mandates it, SBA coordinates it. It directs the policy, it directs the implementation, it reviews progress, receives reports back to Congress. And so when you go to the SBIR.gov site, it is run by the SBA. And so they are the main information link, but every agency is very, very different in how they actually perform in the program. So we'll talk a little bit about that. There are goals to this program, and they're pretty obvious. Innovation. We want to stimulate technological innovation. The government wants to do that. Why? Well, they have their own federal research and development needs. They are constantly needing new things. They want to be on the cutting edge in all elements of their agencies. And so they look to small business because there's an obvious connection between innovation and small business. They also want to foster this innovation through socially and economically disadvantaged persons. In the program, there are not set-asides or points or quotas for these groups. They're not an evaluation factor, but they're definitely encouraging socially and economically disadvantaged persons and those companies run by those persons to participate. The ultimate goal of this program is to increase private sector commercialization. So the government is saying, we want to give you non-dilutive capital to support some research needs that we may have. But ultimately, we know that these research needs, once successful, will turn into a product or a service that either is needed nationally, something that you could buy off the shelf at Home Depot, or might be needed by other agencies, might have still just a government specific purpose, or even just a DoD specific purpose that maybe someone like Lockheed Martin wants to purchase. But the ultimate goal is what we call commercialization. So I'll be talking a lot about that through the presentation. The ultimate mission, and this is from SBA itself, is to support scientific excellence and technological innovation through investment. And they're going to be investing their federal research funds in critical priorities to build a strong national economy. And they want to do this one small business at a time. So this is very focused on really kind of getting down to the grassroots of where technology and innovation comes from and giving these small businesses a chance to get some legs. So it's a super cool program. I mean, it's really neat to know that there is a program in the federal government that I think works well. I've been writing proposals and managing these contracts for about 15 years now. And I've seen so many amazing success stories, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. This is a list of the participating SBIR agencies. So it's not a federal wide. So it's not like if you're a customer, you think it's going to be the VA, they don't participate in this program. Now, ultimately, the VA could be a customer of yours once you commercialize this idea, but the VA is not going to be giving you SBIR money. So the way that they decide the agencies that participate is those agencies that have this extramural R&D budget that exceed $100 million, they are required to allocate 3.2% of that budget to the SBIR and 0.45% to STTR. So SBIR has a lot more opportunities than STTR. What is the difference between STTR? So the slight difference in terms of the aim is that the thought is that there are research institutions. So it could be a nonprofit, a university, a federally funded research and development center. They have innovations, and the easiest way to get those innovations out into the commercial marketplace or even into the government itself is to partner them with a small business. And then that small business essentially is the vehicle to get it out. So the requirement on STTR topics within solicitations from these agencies is to have this institutional partner. So there are not as many agencies that have STTR funds. It's just the Energy, Defense, HHS, NASA, and NSF. And each of these agencies will kind of have a subset of needs or topics that they'll release. And so this is kind of nice that you might have relationships. You might be in academia already. You might have relationships with people at these research institutions. And there's can be some good collaboration, particularly because a lot of research institutions have laboratories or some sort of facilities that you can take a part of that you may not have as a small business. So it's kind of nice to look at some of these STTRs and the ratio of how much work you need to do and how much you need to subcontract to your research institution is a little bit different under the STTR as well, which can sometimes help out small businesses. But again, there's not as much money into these topics, so it might be a little bit more difficult to get an STTR. It just kind of depends. Let's talk a little bit. So this is a really great program. I encourage everybody to look at it, but I also get a lot of questions, and I just kind of want to talk about expectations in terms of how much money is going through here. You know, what are the likelihoods of success in terms of, yes, this is a great program, but how likely is it that I'm going to be successful in it? And as you can see, in terms of obligations, the most recent information we have from the SBA is through 2019 as of right now. The amount of money has been going up and up over all of these decades. Since 1990 is when they've been able to report. You can see phase ones are less money than phase twos, and we'll kind of get into that. But overall, especially the phase two money has been going up significantly. I think when I first started working with these, typically we saw everything around like 500 to 750 for phase two. And now we're seeing a lot of things over $1 million for phase two. These are summaries by year. Don't worry about this like drop in 2021. Nothing actually happened. Things were normal. So I'm not exactly sure how to describe that anomaly. But you can see that the top line with the circles are the award counts. So that's the number of awards, and on the left-hand side, how many they've given and how many companies they've given them to. And the takeaway here is that there's just a lot of good money, and this program is just getting bigger and more utilized. So again, kind of where I don't have a worry for this not getting reauthorized. This is an important one to take a look at, and I don't want you to get discouraged if one of your favorite agencies is here on the right-hand side. This is really correlated to the fact that DoD and HHS have a lot of R&D money in their budget. And so therefore, they have a lot of awards, and they spend a lot of money in the SBIR program. So there's a lot of opportunity in DoD and HHS, DOE and NASA as well. But there's also quite a bit of competition. And these other civilian agencies here to the right, there's definitely competition. They don't have as many topics though, so there's a little bit narrower field for participation. But in general, the award ratios, like P wins, what we call percentage of win, is kind of the same across all these agencies. But a lot of people like to focus here on these agencies on the left because there's just a lot of stuff happening in those agencies. Another award chart, just kind of showing the number of awards and the selection rate. So in general, the selection rate for phase one typically hovers around 25%. And the selection rate for phase two typically hovers around 50 to 60%. This is, people say, oh my gosh, that's so low. I'm going to invest this time and money in going after these things. And I'll tell you this. There's a lot of people who come off the street and have never written a proposal or never written a grant before, and they go into the system and it's complicated. It's not necessarily easy. And it can take them a few times to figure it out if they're not reaching out to an expert or somebody for help. And so that's one element for bringing this down. The second element is it is competitive. And the third element is that a lot of people don't necessarily have the right pitch in terms of really pitching to the agency in terms of what's innovative and how they're going to meet the agency's needs and really thinking about commercialization. So those companies who know what they're doing and can put a compliant proposal in and really think about innovation and probably have done research on their customer have a much higher selection rate than those who don't. I mean, it just kind of makes sense. That's how you do in the commercial world too. You kind of need all those things in order to be successful. So don't get down on this number. You can definitely be higher if you do some things and give yourself a fighting chance. This is just kind of another screenshot to kind of show you how number of proposals we have and phase 1s to phase 2s. Note that you can only get a phase 2 proposal, typically, there are some exceptions, if you were awarded a phase 1. So that's, again, why the number of phase 2s are smaller, because the pool has become much, much smaller. Instead of competing with hundreds of people, like you did on your phase 1, you're competing with maybe 2 or 3 on your phase 2. So that's, again, why you have a higher percentage of a win for a phase 2. And then just some win ratios. Again, they're not, they're kind of all in the same ballpark for phase 1 and kind of all in the same ballpark for phase 2 and the selection rates. So again, there's a lot of reasons that these ratios are what they are, and you have a lot of resources at your disposal to help you bring these ratios up. These are just some of the civilian agencies. As you can see, Department of Transportation has a pretty high selection rate for phase 2, but it shows 0 for phase 1. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but DOT is a little different beast than the rest. DoD is really, they provide information based upon components. So when you submit to the DoD, you're not submitting to the DoD in general, you're submitting to the Air Force or Navy or Army or whoever. So again, they're all about the same. The Air Force's situation is super different than everybody else, and the DoD is kind of morphing into how they participate in this program. And there's a lot of opportunities, but specifically in the Air Force, but we're seeing this with Navy and Army lately, is to come in and present a proposal for like a commercial offering. So you might already have something that's out there in the commercial market. And what their programs are now doing is saying, hey, we want some stuff from the commercial market. We're going to give you like $50,000 for you to come talk to us essentially and investigate where your offering can fit. And this is like having all these commercial companies just come out of the woodwork and kind of bringing in a ton of different companies that have never considered themselves qualified for SBIR because perhaps they've already funded their R&D internally and they're kind of beyond a typical SBIR path. But now the Air Force is saying, that's fine. We want to know what you have and let's see if we can modify what you have for Air Force needs. And we'll give you some money to do that. So that's something really cool that's happening with the DoD that you might be interested in looking into if you feel like, you might be beyond this R&D path already. Let's talk a little bit about the structure. I've talked about 1s and 2s. Let's talk about what these 1s and 2s are if you're not familiar with these. So a phase 1 is to kind of test the merit and feasibility of a concept. So if you're familiar with technology readiness levels, we're typically talking about a 2 or a 3. We're kind of at the lower end of technology readiness levels that can go up to 10. So these are typically, again, every agency is totally different. They could be 6 months to a year long. There could be option periods. They could be valued from $50,000, like I was mentioning with these little Air Force sprints, up to $250,000 even. NSF, I think, is up at $275,000 right now, actually, for National Science Foundation. So you get some time, you get some money, you say, I've got this idea, I'm going to test it out, we're going to see if it has some legs. And then if phase 1 proves successful, then you might be able to get a phase 2. And that is to bring you through like a prototype or a demo. So you pick up where you left off at 1, and at the end of 2, you should be at something that's like a proven thing. You've got a prototype, you've got a demonstration, and it's ready, hopefully, to start moving into commercialization. And so these are typically about 2 years long. They can go up to almost $2 million. This Air Force situation I was just talking about, I've seen phase 2s that are $3 to $4 million of awards because they're very different. So there's a lot of money. If you can just kind of get your foot in the door, there's just so much money that can come in to really kind of give your idea life and bring it out into the world. And the government's not really asking for anything in return. And we'll kind of talk about that in the benefits section. This third phase is sort of this unofficial phase. There are some agencies that will issue you a contract that says phase 3 on it. The biggest difference is that the money that's on that agreement is not SBIR colored money. The agency has found other money in their coffers that's not part of the program, but it's bringing it to the SBIR contract that you have and bringing it to the technology. What's super cool about this is that it's considered sole source. So at this stage, at the end of your phase 2, the customer you're working with, or there could be another customer out there, a different agency is super interested in what you got. They can sole source, meaning there's no competition. So you could get millions of dollars without competition. And this is like not a gimmick. This is not some phone call or some email that you got when you registered in SAM.gov and you get all these things. This is for real that you can get millions of dollars without competition. So that's another great thing. And again, this is kind of bringing this thing to life, and you're starting to make your prototype into actual units, perhaps to sell for the government. And so that's kind of the ultimate goal here is to get to this phase 3. There is a phase 0. The most obvious one is the NSF. It's a project pitch. If you've looked at the NSF, you have to submit a project pitch in order to be invited to write a phase 1. And I'll say this is another benefit of the program because there can be there's decent time and money that's involved in doing these SBIR proposals, especially if you've never done one before. And you are kind of just shooting in the dark sometimes if you haven't had a conversation with the technical points of contact, or, you haven't been able to ask questions, and you're just kind of hoping and wishing as you submit your proposal that it gets selected. Well, NSF has this project pitch that they require you to do. And they say, hey, you know what? I think you're a fit. Go ahead and give me a phase 1. So you're like, oh, thank goodness. At least I know I'm on the right track before I go do all this effort. So I think that's a really cool benefit that NSF does. I wish more agencies did them. It's super smart of them to do that. But essentially, their whole aim, again, is to create small businesses and create these innovations. So a question I get often is like, I'm just one person, or I'm a 2-person company. I'm working out of my garage. Can I do this? And the answer is totally yes. There's not a minimum, you might be pre-revenue. That's totally fine. There's ways that you can write your proposal to ensure that, the government's not going to freak out that you're pre-revenue or that you're 2 people. There's certain agencies who are more open to that kind of situation than others. That's probably a little too into the weeds for today's presentation. But when we talk about creation of small businesses, kind of this project pitch is really helpful for those onesie-twosie person companies, because you're able to tell the government, like, hey, this is me. This is my idea. Are you okay with it? And they say yes. NIH has a version of this, but NSF is the one that uses it really. And here is the website. You can just even Google NSF SBIR, and you can find this. So you can put in your pitch, and in 3 to 5 weeks, you'll find out if they want you to submit a proposal. We'll talk quickly about what SBIR is not. I really want to be very clear on this because I got lots of questions. Unless you've got this Air Force commercial solutions thing that I was talking about, it's not a place to sell your invention to the government. If you already have this invention, it's patented, you're like just looking for a customer, that's not what the government wants. The government is looking for you years ago when you first started off trying to build this invention. So a lot of people get disappointed. They're like, oh, I put all of my, friends and family money, my life savings into this thing. And now I've got this invention. And you're telling me that there was this program out there the whole time that would pay for all that. And I have to tell them, yes, yeah, you could have gotten some non-dilutive capital to get to where you are. But anyway, it's just not a place to sell your doohickey or your widget that you invented to the government. There's other places to do that. And the PTAC can definitely help you find those customers. It's not guaranteed, as you know, you saw those win rates. It's not non-competitive until you get to that phase 3. It's also not a continuous R&D track. They measure your success in terms of how many phase 1s have turned into 2s and how many 2s have received commercialization dollars. And if you're not getting to those commercialization dollars after a certain point of time, it's a pretty long period of time and a lot of awards, then you get kicked out of the program. So it's not just there for people to just goof around and be like 1s and 2s and 1s and 2s. At some point, they'll tell you, hey, you're not meeting the goal of the program, so you're out. It is still government money. So even though if you're a onesie, twosie company, you still have reporting, you still have audits, you have other government regulations. So again, it's not like just free funny money. It's still federal funds. And it's not a value engineering program. And what this means is that this is not a place for you to kind of take something that you've already engineered and just kind of bring it one little step closer to the next TRL level, or to something that's kind of an obvious, easy engineering thing to kind of just improve upon it. SBIR is looking for innovation. Specifically, NSF looks for high risk, high reward. They're looking for good, big ideas. They're not just looking for like kind of these easy fixes on something that, was going to happen anyway. So kind of keep that in mind. Again, it's non-dilutive for your R&D funding. It allows you to investigate opportunities for commercialization. Where is this thing going to go? How does it fit into your business plan? It can diversify your revenue, which is really, really nice. Maybe you do commercial stuff and you're getting into government, you want some money from there, or you're looking to potentially make the government a bigger customer of yours. They're a new agency perhaps. So there's a lot of diversification of your portfolio that can happen. A really cool point to this, especially some of the civilian agencies, they want you to solve societal and economic problems with your innovations. You get points for those things. They want to see some larger benefit besides just reading a research need. So that's kind of a cool thing. Obviously, you're fulfilling their civilian and military needs that they have in the moment. Specifically with the military, they have specific technological needs. And so that is what the SBIR program is all about. And they want you to further the state of the art. So what's out there right now, and we want to give you some money, company, to do something super cool. We know that you may be a little risk averse to using your own money for super cool. So we're going to give you some of our own, and hopefully you can increase that state of the art. So that's a really cool benefit. And I've seen a lot of companies who've broken into government work with this SBIR stuff. As I mentioned, there's commercial companies who have some really cool ideas, and they never really thought that they would get into the government realm. And they've heard about this program, and they've been able to capitalize on this funding. And I've had some clients that thought they were going to be purely commercial, and now they have tens of millions of dollars in government funds in and outside of the SBIR program. And now the government seems like they're going to be their main customer. And now they've got other governments across the globe that are interested in being their customer, because the American government's their customer. So super interesting on how businesses trajectories can change, but it is a way to kind of break in if you're looking to break in, and it's definitely a way to grow a company. So many, it's so great to see my clients who have started off. I have many clients that started off as 1 or 2 person companies, literally working out of their basement, garage, or off whatever kitchen table. And, 3 or 4 years later, they're 100 person companies, they have boards, they just having 1 or 2 SBIR phase 1s have just launched them into the stratosphere. And there's lots of large businesses now. who started off in the SBIR program as well. And they have thousands and thousands of employees, and they're common household names. And it's super, super neat to know that this program is around. And again, it can be a path for the sole source contract, which is kind of the holy grail of government contracting. So those are all really cool elements of this program if you do it right. So some considerations though, again, like this is federal money, this is taxpayer dollars. So there's rules, and this program has rules on who can participate and how the money is used. So first, in order to be eligible, you have to be a small business, which according to this program is 500 or fewer employees, including all your affiliates. Now, I know a lot of people, especially if you're participating in a PTAC call, you're like thinking, what the heck, 500 is a humongous company. And I agree with you. It's a very large company, in my opinion, especially with the people I work with. But anyway, small business, that's the way they've defined it. You have to be independently owned and operated, and you have to be for profit. So this is not for nonprofits. You can definitely be a subcontractor to a for-profit company and you guys can work together, but for profits. You have to have your principal place of business in the United States. And there's an ownership requirement regarding majority ownership by U.S. citizens or other small business concerns that are owned by U.S. citizens. So this is kind of a complicated arithmetic in terms of anyone who might have multiple investors already in their company, or venture capital, or private equity, or hedge fund, all of those things. If you have some interesting ownership structure, specifically if some of those structures are other businesses or individuals who reside or who are citizens of another country, then that's something you should look at carefully. There's a lot of information, and you can always reach out to an expert to help you make sure that you're eligible. And it's really important to make sure you're eligible, because there are certifications that you have to sign when you submit the proposal and when you are done with your contract, essentially saying that, I'm telling the truth, and if I'm not telling the truth, I'm going to Leavenworth prison. So make sure that, you really are valid for these qualifications. So once you have this contractor grant, then the work has to be performed in the United States. So no work can be performed by, say, a subcontractor in another country or something like that. There are waivers, but it's better to get the contract first and then talk to your contracting officer about unique situations. For phase one, there's a self-performance requirement that you have to perform 2/3 of the work for phase one and 1/2 for phase two. Each agency calculates these percentages differently, so pay close attention on how they do that. But essentially, you can't have your idea and be a one-person company and then subcontract the entire thing out to somebody else to actually do the work. So you have to have the capability and capacity in a phase one to perform self-perform 2/3 of the work. Now, most phase ones are purely labor. We're doing a lot of it's research, right? And so you have to have the people to do that. And I have some clients who have interesting scenarios and situations regarding that, because they use 1099s. 1099s are not W-2s, they're not part of your company, so they don't count. And so if you're in that situation, reach out to an expert and ask them some questions on how to be creative to meet these performance thresholds. It seems to be the most difficult one for businesses to handle. The principal investigator, this is the person you identify as the lead researcher, the lead person to kind of move this project forward. They have to be employed at the business majority of the time. Each agency has a different calculation on what that means. So essentially, they can't work full-time anywhere else is really kind of what it means. And then commercialization potential. This is a big one. Things to ask yourself before you jump into this program is, where does this technology end up? What is the market? Who are your government customers? Who are your commercial customers? What's the market size? What will this do for your own company? How does this benefit your business plan? These are all super, super important, because not only are they evaluated and you have to talk about them in a proposal, but it's super smart business sense before you start embarking on some new path, regardless of whose money you're using, to ask these questions. Because if you don't ask these questions, then where is that path going to end up? And it's going to be kind of a messy road to get there. So, this is kind of a self-reflection sort of process that you need to consider before you jump into this program, because you won't reap the benefits of the program if you don't actually think about these things. And you may not win a phase one in the first place because you didn't answer these questions. So things to talk about with your agency, again, you're proposing to an agency, not to SBIR, not to SBA. So if you want to win, which agency wants your technology? Where is it most applicable? Is it super specific? Is it malleable to an agency need? How does it fit within the agency? Is it high risk, high reward? Something NSF wants. NSF just says, hey, give us some ideas. We're not even going to tell you where to fit necessarily. We're not going to give you a specific need, but is it cool enough for our money? And, how is it going to benefit society? That's what we want to know. Understanding if it's solely military, if it has dual purpose, that's important. Is it state of the art? What is that agency currently doing? What do they understand state of the art to be? And that's all important about these agencies. The solicitation schedule is different too. So the program can be super beneficial as long as the money comes in at a time when you need it, right? So say you're kind of on a fast growth trajectory. Can you wait until December, January, February of, 2022, 2023 for NASA to release their next solicitation and then wait 6 months for that money to come in? So if you're thinking NASA is going to be my agency, can you wait until this time or later next year for that phase one money to come in? Or are you already going to be beyond where, you're going to just keep on trucking and won't even qualify for that phase one anymore? So these solicitation schedules are super important. You can see some of them are kind of ongoing all the time, like NSF and HHS. There's multiple due dates. But then some, like I just mentioned, NASA is just once a year. So pay really close attention to how these go. And then there's certain ones that come out at different times. As FYI, the Navy is releasing today. I haven't checked this morning, but the Navy should have topics out that are out of cycle from the rest of the DoD. I'm not sure why they're starting to do those things, but Navy's out like this moment. So you kind of have to keep your finger on the pulse, and you can go to the SBIR.gov. You can kind of sign up for alerts. There's all these different things you can do to make sure you're on top of this. Okay. I talked a lot about benefits just sprinkled throughout the program, just in general, why this is good for growth, why this is good for innovation, non-dilutive capital, all of that great stuff. But there are other specific benefits that I want to talk about. And I want to first start off with success stories that you can go and take a look at in terms of what does a winning company look like? What benefits did they get out of this program? And you can go to the SBIR.gov site and take a look at some success stories. I pulled a few out of here just to kind of give a general overview of the variety of topics and technologies that are awarded. So we have traumatic brain injury from one company. We have decontamination facilities from a family business in a small town in South Dakota. Cutting edge prosthetics from New Hampshire, and hearing impairment translation technologies. So just super cool things that are from all over the place, and things that obviously are going to help. If you can think about all of these things, can be commercialized in the public sector. So that's really cool. And again, the important element of being successful. But these companies aren't necessarily going to say, oh, we only want the government to be our customer. We're going to build a company around the nugget of seed money that we got from the federal government. Okay, intellectual property development. A lot of people get super concerned that they are taking government money and therefore they're going to lose all rights and title to anything they develop. And so there is strategy regarding whose money, your own or the federal government's, that you use to develop technology. This is a whole nother 2-hour course that I'm going to put into like 1 or 2 slides. But I want to just let you know that there's still benefit here, even though the government's paying for IP development. So we call intellectual property. The government calls it 3 different things. So we have technical data, computer software documentation, and patents. And computer software is included with the documentation. And so we have to think when we're receiving these funds that these 3 buckets are treated differently with different clauses in your contract or grant. What ends up happening is that anything that you've developed with this SBIR money is essentially licensed to the government. So you retain right and title and ownership, which is awesome. That is like a huge benefit of this. You get non-dilutive capital, so nobody's taking a stake in your company. And also you get to keep and own the intellectual property developed with this money, but you have to give the government a little bit of a license to it. And there's this SBIR data rights clause that shows up and kind of says, this is what the government's allowed to do. And that rights of what they're allowed to do is actually pretty limited. The title to the patentable inventions remains with you, the inventor. So you get to keep a patentable invention as long as that all the reporting that goes along with it occurs. So you alert them that there could be a patentable invention. You let them know it's actually been patented, yada, yada. It's all in your contract or grant. If you're not sure how to do it, reach out to an expert. But you get to keep it. Again, a great benefit. Somebody else pays for it, you get to keep it. Of course, they may not pay for you to actually patent it and pay your attorney to go to the PTO, but the development of it is patented. Pre-existing IP is also protected. So anything that you've done on your own dime or brought in to the program that you're going to be using and developing, the government does not gain title to that either. They get super limited rights to that. And this is a whole nother class, but there's assertions that you need to make to this pre-existing IP to protect it. And if you've got kind of a mixed bag situation, there's a different level of rights. These are all kind of like different levels of rights to the government that they have. So essentially, again, licenses that they get. And you can always bring in prior SBIR data rights. The government may not always agree for various reasons. Again, I can't get into those today, I don't have time, but you can bring prior SBIR data rights into other SBIR projects or other non-SBIR projects. And so that's kind of the cool thing is that if you develop something on an SBIR program and then you go use it on a non-SBIR program, you get to keep protections around that IP. And you can keep protections on that IP if you're supporting as a subcontractor to a larger prime on a government program. So that's super cool. And the patents are respected by the government, just like any other commercial. So if you already have a patent and you've got this patentable invention as part of the whole program, the government's like anybody else. They have to respect that patent. And you might have commercial rights. Say you have like a commercial software and it has a EULA. You just have to identify that to the customer, and that pre-existing IP will be protected as well. And one thing I should mention, in general, and it's very specific in the DoD and NASA right now, is that this protection period for SBIR data rights is 20 years. So the thought is that the government has super limited right to use anything you've developed for 20 years. And of course, after 20 years, that thing's probably, if it's innovative, it's probably not going to be innovative in 20 years. And so that's actually sort of a newer change. They've increased the time period on that. The other really cool thing that comes with the SBIR program is this thing called TABA, or Technical and Business Assistance. The SBA recognized that they're grading you on commercialization. Their aim is commercialization, but small businesses don't necessarily have the resources or funds to commercialize their product because they're small business. They can't hire a business development person to do market research, or a manufacturing consultant or an IP attorney. And so they give you money. They give you money to do that, which is super amazing. So they want you to make better technical decisions. minimize risks, commercialize the thing, understand where it's going to go, protect your IP in the public space. And you can receive money from the agencies at a different level, and each agency supports, some don't give you TABA for phase one and some do. So you just have to look at the solicitation. But essentially they just want you to commercialize. And so they're going to give you some money to help you commercialize. It's paid for again by the agency. You can select a TABA provider, or the agency might give you an option to use their TABA provider. You again look at the solicitation. You're responsible for billing the agency for those expenses, and then the TABA provider bills you just like a subcontractor would. You have to identify the time of your proposal if you're intended to use the TABA funds. And most cases, this funding is in addition to the awarded amount. So if it's just, $150,000 award, and they're going to give you $6,500 for a TABA phase one, then that's in addition. So you get a $156,500 award actually. So if you use a TABA vendor of your own that you've selected, and there's lots of consulting firms out there, you're not eligible to take advantage of commercialization assistance that other agencies might have. They might have their own programs to help you out. And so you kind of have to just make that decision. These are great numbers, and these are fairly recently have been increased from prior versions of this program. So phase one, you can get up to $6,500. And phase two, you can get up to $50,000, which is amazing. So again, look at the solicitation, see if they offer it, identify if they do offer it, who you're going to use, and then you have to identify what they're going to do for you. They being the TABA consultant. Really quickly, just to talk about where to begin. Hey, you got an idea, let's go after some non-dilutive capital. This is where your company is the best fit. If you're working on a technology, you have a specific idea or looking for funding to advance it, you've decided that your company is eligible, you've kind of gone through that process, you validated that company's and the PI's eligibility, that's important as well. You've registered to do business with the government and the SBIR program, and the PTAC can definitely help you do that. You've identified the agency or agencies that you think are a good fit, and that timeline that I showed you is also a good fit. Then it's time to apply to the specific solicitation, of course, when it's open. I'd suggest taking a look and wandering around the SBIR.gov site, just because there's so much stuff in here. The resources tab has training. This is where those success stories are. You can see who has won prior awards. If you're thinking, a company or competitor, it has all of the agency's links. So definitely wander around here to learn a little bit more. I'd also suggest doing due diligence. Again, what are the agencies looking for? What do they fund? Looking at prior solicitations and selections. The NASA selections for 2021 should be up now, but you can look at any year if you want. You can go back. Some need to knows. The contract types dependent on the agency. You have to ensure that the objectives that are given to you by the agency are met in the narrative of your proposal. You need to have a plan for phase two and beyond when you start to write. Like, really, again, think about it. This is a benefit to your company. So think about the benefit in the long term. Anybody who has relationships with the technical points of contact or program managers are definitely more successful. So if you do have some runway in your timeline, it can benefit you to go ahead and start, connecting with those people who are publicized and out there. There could be ITAR, which is export and data rights issues. So just watch out for those and ask for help. And then if you're in the right timeline, you could definitely ask questions of the agency during pre-solicitation phases. These are all things that'll help you be more successful. And just so that you know, before you get into it, obviously you want to get a phase 2 if you're going into a phase 1. There's a lot more detail that's required for your budget. You might have an audit trigger for the Navy. If you get a phase 2, they're going to come audit your accounting system. You need to have a quantifiable commercialization. So you definitely need to put resources and time and effort into really having a solid commercialization plan. Going out and getting letters of support may also help you out, and some agencies allow them and some don't. But again, hopefully you're already kind of figuring out who your customers are, and those won't be a problem. And then if you're buying stuff underneath of these contracts, that happens often in phase 2, that some of those things could be treated as government property. So it depends on the agency and something to kind of think about and plan. So there's a lot of strategy that goes along in this program. But, kind of if you have the ultimate ability of time and money, anybody can be successful in this program, but we don't have that. So you really kind of have to be focused and be careful in order to realize the benefits. These are just some other useful websites you can wander around. The agencies use different sites, again, because they're all different. And some turn into grants, some turn into contracts, and that's just agency dependent. So kind of wander around if you have the time. That is my presentation. I kind of fire hosed you with a ton of information. So hopefully you have some questions. And Yasmin, I'll turn it over to you to facilitate if anybody had any questions.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was very detailed and thorough. We appreciate it. So yes, now is your opportunity to type out your questions for Stephanie in the chat box. I know you must have some. As she said, you were given a lot of information and it takes some time to digest. If you don't think of any questions now, you can, is it okay if they email you later on, Stephanie, with a question?
Yes, absolutely. My email is here on this last slide. Feel free to record that down and shoot me an email and I'll try to get back to you.
Okay, great. Well, it doesn't look like we have any questions. I will be sending out the slides in about 5 minutes. And as I said earlier, this was recorded, so this will be available probably later today on our YouTube channel. And I will put that link in the email that I'll be sending to you as well. So you can watch it again or share it with some of your colleagues. So I'd like to thank Stephanie so much for doing this for us. It's really great information. And I'd like to thank the audience as well for participating. So thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, everybody. And we will see you again soon on another PTAC webinar.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Yasmin.
Thank you. Bye-bye.